my God, am I tired? How are you doing? You know, I thought about getting a little bit more cleaned up for this video, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll be okay. Actually, what I was doing was, all day yesterday, was climbing around on a pretty large farm. I had a house on it for some people that were looking at it. Look at all the attributes, the water of the house, where the land is, access. Oh my God, there's so many variables, and I have them all in my head. You know, you want to see how old the HVAC is. This particular one had a house on it. And, you know, when the farm was lumbered, you know, what type of trees on it. Are they hardwood, softwood? And if they're hardwood, what kind of hardwood? Oak and walnut. And the structures, including barns or whatnot. What type of water sources? I mean, whether it's creeks or lakes. Access to town. The roads, whether it's a single or lane and a half road or a 2-lane road. I mean, is it a really snaky road where, you know, you're white knuckling it, white knuckling it to go to the grocery store from your land? That's actually a really important point. That's actually not part of the land. You know, the fences, the creeks, the caves, the ponds, the springs. Also, too, you want to look at your neighbors. You know, are your neighbors single wide trailers, and there's there's two cars in the front yard, and they're sitting up on cinder blocks? Yeah, those are really important things. Actually, I've had an enormous amount, and I know it's partially because of what's going on in the world, but people have actually too been listening to me about not renting. And I've given examples. You know, theory is one thing. It's kind of like academicians will talk about stuff, but they don't actually practice what they preach, and everything is just theoretical. I'm completely worn out and haven't made a video for a few days because yesterday, you know, scruffy-faced, you know, in my big boots and my Army BDU pants and climbing around on the land. You know, asking all the questions and being nosy and picky about the land. I want to talk about some secrets on land that I've discovered. And by the way, I'm not an extreme fan, I'm going to say this very gently, not an extreme fan of realtors, but there are some good ones out there. I don't get any kickbacks, okay? This is not an affiliate link or anything like that. Her name is Tina Neal, and she's actually in the description below. She's based out of Berea, Kentucky. Tina Neal, N-E-A-L. So I have a link to her. I've actually, you know, been with her looking at some land. She's got a great sense of humor and extremely helpful. And she actually has access to a lot of raw land. Yesterday's farm that I was looking at was special because it did have a very nice farmhouse on it, and I was inspecting that, and you know, all the stuff. I'm not going to give any details because all that's private. I don't want to give any more details than is necessary on particular pieces of land, obviously, because that's not the prerogative to do that. People want to remain private 9 times out of 10. I also, too, since everybody's been talking about this on land, I have said specifically over and over again that you can actually get 2 to 5 acres and a tiny home for $30,000 or less. I mean, realistically, if you look hard, you can get it for $25,000 or less. And this is not like, well, you really, really, really have to look hard to be able to do that, and that's not the case at all. You don't. I assure you of this. I look at land several times a day, and you don't have to do that. People screech at me all the time in live stream and in the comments because I read every comment about property. Well, if you have prime property taxes, you don't really own the land. See what happens when you stop paying property taxes and you see if it's your land or not. Well, what is technically true is notable. It is still your land, and compared to basically every other country in the world, Kentucky, by the way, is great. You think Tennessee would be the same. A lot of people think, well, maybe look in Tennessee. You know, think about moving out there. Kentucky sounds good when I look at Tennessee. No slight against Tennessee, but by the way, this is an empirical fact. It's based upon an enormous amount of criteria. You could look this up for yourself. The most corrupt city in the United States is Chattanooga, Tennessee. You think, well, it's right next to Kentucky. You know, it's it's about the same as Kentucky, I bet. Property taxes are way higher. The land is higher. The government in Tennessee is totally different. Even though it's the South, and even though it's touching Kentucky by many, many countless hundreds of miles on the southern border of Kentucky, it is extremely liberal in many of its leanings. There's a lot of, let's just say it's kind of, Tennessee is very, very much like Louisiana. And if you know anything about Louisiana, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, maybe you should Google corruption a la Louisiana. Tennessee is not the same as Kentucky. The property taxes here are essentially the cheapest in the nation. I have seen stuff that looks like Satan's jockstrap, and where you got, you do 360 degrees out in Utah and Wyoming. You like look around through and there's nothing for 30 miles, nothing for 30 miles, not a tree, maybe some rattlesnake. There's nothing. And that land, which is horrible. Okay, it's horrible. It's like, whoa, it's okay. I can live off of it. Barely. You can live off of eating oatmeal and Brussels sprouts your whole life too, but it'd certainly be extremely unpleasant. That land, and I'm not exaggerating, and I've looked all over the country over and over and over again for decades, is more expensive than beautiful Kentucky land. Ohio does not have 4 real seasons. Ohio is a little too freaking cold. Okay, it doesn't matter where it is in Ohio, including Cincinnati, which, the southernmost point of Ohio, doesn't have 4 real seasons. Tennessee kind of has 4 real seasons, but not really. Kentucky has 4 perfect seasons, and most of Kentucky, you're only looking at 3 or 4 hard snows a year. And what does that mean? That's the definition of like a heavy snow. I mean, there have been exemptions where there was like a lot of snow or a lot of ice storm, but that is not what happens every year. That's like a rarity. So that's a lot of snow in Kentucky. And you might look out the window and go, I think I'm going to stay inside and, eat what I got in the freezer and, warm myself by the fire or the heater or the, the heating blanket, whatever you got. So Kentucky is very beautiful land for the most part. I mean, like 98% of it is. Not literally, but pretty close. Cheapest land in the United States is Kentucky. I tell people this in live stream, and they don't believe me. I bought land out in Pikeville, Kentucky, which is far eastern Kentucky. It's got a separate deed for a coal mine. I paid $240 an acre, $243 technically. The 75 acres was exactly $18,300. That is a fact. That's for 75 acres. It's got a creek up the middle of it, a gravel road up the middle of it. It's got water on it. Old growth trees. I could sell like a third of the old growth trees on it and recoup all my money back, and then the land would be free. My buddy actually is still kicking himself today. He had the opportunity to buy this mountaintop that overlooks Mount Sterling, and his dad talked him out of it. He's like in his 70s now, but his dad talked him out of it. Well, the guy that bought it had it forested, lumbered. They just took the large trees. They didn't mow it down or shave it, like I got my head shaved here. Not that I really have to shave my head very often. And he got all his money back, which makes the land completely free. Nobody is totally sovereign, that old saying, no man is an island. But being as sovereign as possible is incredibly important, and you can do that in Kentucky, and the land is the cheapest in the United States. That's a fact, Jack. Go look for yourself. Some stuff in West Virginia is nearly as cheap. Really, really ugly land in Missouri. Still too expensive. I've seen some cheap pieces there, but not really. Having your own, the farm that I was examining yesterday, has countless lifetimes of free lumber on it for heating and cooking. I know how to install solar. I could teach somebody how to install solar. It's not that difficult at all, so you're independent of the grid. The serious issue on money is batteries, but I mean just to run your primary things, not your heater, not your washer and dryer. I mean, you have a heater, and this one actually has a gigantic stove, a wood stove on it. But water sources like creeks and streams and ponds, springs being most important. Having your own food and growing your own food, knowing whether the land is fenced off or there are areas where you can actually grow food, like in a sunroom, in the house, or on the back side of the house. But land is gold. Land, I don't care how much people screech about property taxes. That's just an ignorant statement. That's like saying, well, I have gold. It's really heavy and you got to move it. It's too heavy to, There is no such thing as 100% percent perfection other than heaven and the transcendent divine absolute itself. Other than that, everything has a little negative here, a little negative there. You know, say life is wonderful, but you're going to suffer and die, no matter how wonderful life is. So when people screech about property taxes, you know, I can acknowledge what they're true about. They're telling you an accurate fact, but they're actually lying about the whole story because, you know, until you pass away and until you decide, you know, to let your property taxes lapse for 5 years plus, depends on where it's at, before they have a courtroom house sale, which they will do. It's like, hey, this person hasn't paid his property taxes in 10 years. We're going to sell it on the courthouse steps. Other than that, it feeds you, it protects you, it clothes you, it keeps you warm. Hunt on it, you know, grow your own stuff on it. And this is being sovereign. The people that actually understand that sovereignty, it's not palpable, kind of like a radio signal or the soul. People want objective palpability where they can actually stick it in their hands. And there's a palpable nature of land that everybody that buys it, and I've talked to a lot of first-time landowners, like, you know, I didn't get it until I owned land. And then it just like totally clicked to me what you've been saying for years about land. And it's exactly true. It's nothing. I mean, it is objective. I mean, all these things of sovereignty, where it's feeding and clothing you and protecting you, and it is your land that you can't lay your hands on. It's not palpable. It's not demonstrable and objective in most cases. But it's a great feeling when people. This is the reason too why the renter. We're getting into this renter world. Yeah, you know it, and I know it. We're already there, but we're heading more into the renter world. When you don't own it, like when people rent a car, it's the same thing as a house. When you're renting it, you don't care about it. It's not yours. Well, I'm just renting it. You know, if I trash it, who cares? It's not my property, technically. People look after and protect the property because it looks after them, and they are the owner of same. And the same goes true of land. When you actually have it, you care about it. It should be the case that people borrow other people's stuff, they take care of it, but you know as well as I do, people don't. And this renter world, that's blatantly obvious. I'm completely opposed to it. Someone called me today wanting to buy my house here, and I always lie to them because they're a bunch of spammers. They were wanting to buy my house and your house so they could turn it into a rental facility. I forget the name of the company. They just started up a couple years ago, but they've already owned countless tens of thousands. I think it's over 100,000 homes. They just bought them outright. They're not interested in flipping them or selling them. They're interested in having long-term, you know, forever into the future income for renters. They just want to buy everything they can. And that's going on right now big time in the United States. Getting out into the country, I mean, say it's 10 or 15 miles away from town. The sovereignty that you get, I mean, who cares? I know gas is high. 10 or 15 miles, if you're that lazy that you can't actually see getting a decent-sized piece of land in your own home that you would have paid for instantly as opposed to renting. Well, I want to live in the city. Well, good for you. You're just going to rent forever. You're never going to own anything in most cases, especially in this realty market. And, of course, things could certainly crash. I don't actually evaluate commercial property or residential property, just raw land, but I know how to look into a residential property and see, if the electric good, what's this, when it was built, how good's the HVAC, what's the structure like, does it have termites, what's the water heater age, so on and on and on. I mean, I know how to look for that. Also, too, you have a farm, you get an AG, an ag discount, or a farming exemption. I have that on two of my properties. I have a farming exemption, makes the property taxes way, way cheaper. My 81-acre farm with the cabin on it, the property taxes were $440. So cabin, 81 acres, $440. Cheap. Get this, my 75 acres, which I would not call a farm really, you could call it a farm, 75 acres that I own in Pikeville, property taxes, get this, $105 a year. I mean, that's right, that I paid $18,300 for, $105 per year. That could go up next year, I know that. Also, too, looking for land, look for passive income spots. If you buy it, say you get 6 acres, like, well, I can't really afford it. Wait, yeah, but there's all these passive income potentials on it. Like, here's a spot, and here's a spot. They can actually have someone plop a tiny home on, and you actually become a landlord. You have all this passive income, which is not only paying for your property taxes, but when you want to take a vacation or something, you just have one of your tenants that's staying on, like, hey, look after it. I'm going to take a vacation for 2 weeks. Okay, I'll give you a $100 discount. All you have to do is just keep your eye open, keep the window shade open, make sure no one's pulling in my driveway. I hear this all the time. I myself am trying to do a passive income rental on my farm near Glasgow, Kentucky. I already had a couple people look at it. So I have that beautiful farm. That's actually the best piece of land that I have. One thing that people don't consider, they look at a lot of land, they go, oh my God, how do I take care of this? There's a lot of land. Say, 10 acres, 20, 30, 40, 50, 80, 100. Raw land takes care of itself. Yeah? Unless it's pasture land, and you can actually do a swap to keep the pasture land. Here in Kentucky, harvesting for hay is twice a year. At most, depending on how it rains, 3 times a year. It's like, hey, you collect the hay, I get some money. My pasture land is taken care of, and if you, for example, you don't want to have livestock on it. People forget that. Raw land does take care of itself. Say, well, how much of your land is raw land, and how much of it is, the area where you want to put your cabin, or, the pasture land for your cattle? It's like, well, it's usually like somewhere around 75–80% raw land, and 15 to 20%, the neat, tidy area around the house and or the pasture land for the cows. So. When you buy a place, actually, you need to be proactive on the property taxes on the first year because the government is really, really, really slow. You have to, for the first year, call the PVA Sheriff's Office, which actually issues the taxes, and be proactive on that. Very, very important to have mineral rights. Without mineral rights, you're owning the topsoil, basically, and that's it. If you don't have mineral rights, you essentially don't have any land. Well, I got a bunch of land really cheap. Does it have any mineral rights? No, it doesn't. Well, you just bought a bunch of topsoil about that thick. I mean, someone else owns everything on your land, and they want to strip mine it or do whatever to access whatever. It's theirs. It's not yours. Now, that is really bad in some states, not so bad in others. Depends on what sort of gas or oil you have. Like my land in Pikeville, which is coal country. I actually have a separate deed for the mineral rights, and that is really important. Almost nobody up in that area has mineral rights because coal is underneath basically everything. And while they have the home, they don't have anything under it. So they want to drill underneath it and do whatever they want. Of course, it's very, very, very expensive. It has to be, cost beneficial for them to do that. But they can do it because you don't own the mineral rights. Check for zoning on what you can or can't build. This is another great thing about Kentucky. Every place in the United States essentially has some sort, even like in Bumblescum, Wyoming, the middle of nowhere, like a one-horse town. There's all these zoning where you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's almost like a homeowners association where you can only paint your house a certain select type of color. If I sound really worn out, I am. I was crawling all over a farm yesterday. I thought about cleaning up for this video once again. Oh, you sound really tired. Are you sick? I know someone will say that about this video. It's just that I'm extremely exhausted, actually. I mean, I did my duty yesterday, crawling all over that farm. I made like 50 videos, literally. Now, they're only like 2 minutes long on average, but I made 50 videos. Take the advantages of realtors. Realtors actually work in volume. Once again, I gave you the name of Tina Neal. Her link is in the description below. Also, too, I created a free 2-page tip sheet on things to look for and tips and tricks on buying raw land. That is also, too, at the top of the description below. It's raw land buying tips and tricks. I highly suggest you actually download that. It's totally free and check it out. Any donation is always warmly welcome. Thank you very much. A lot of people contact me wanting to look for land. I can find stuff. I'm having a farm I'm trying to lease out. I'm not mentioning that in the video for, any reason at all on that. So a lot of people recently, it's just there's surges on this, but a whole lot recently been emailing me and talking about it in live stream, so I wanted to talk about it here. It's not mere location. If you're looking for, something really cheap, you can get it in Kentucky. I found land for my friends in Florida. I found land for other friends in Florida. I found land for my doctor from Utah. She's now a farmer near London, Kentucky, and she's really happy, and she's doing great. Man, she's growing all sorts of stuff. Kentucky has, there's a couple bad spots, but only a couple. Louisville, of course, is bad. Louisville is like Kentucky's version of Portland, Oregon. So Louisville, really, yeah, Louisville is But neighbors in Kentucky are really, really nice. This idea that, everybody's like playing banjos and wearing overalls and, got a still and making some white lightning in their backyard. That actually happens a little bit some places. Everybody in Kentucky is like a Sling Blade guy. Taters and biscuits. It's just not true at all. I'm a Neoplatonic Platonist, a metaphysician, a translator, and philosopher, and I'm as Kentucky as it gets. I have Kentucky farmland. Yaw and meow and meow and meow. Do I fit your stereotype of Kentucky? Do I have any particular accent that sticks out to you? I'm crawling around in the mud in the Kentucky woods yesterday. Yeehaw! That farm turns out to have a lot of morel mushrooms on it. It's a very, very beautiful place. I enjoyed looking it over. Not looking it over, but evaluating and looking it over and being very technical and analytical and logical and rational, which I was at the time. Now I'm not so much because I'm totally exhausted. So if I sound a little sick or exhausted and I do look a little scruffy, it's because that's what I was doing. But I can go and evaluate land for you too if you're remote. A lot of people are remote and they'll want me to look at it, and I'll talk about the pluses and the minuses, and I keep in mind not any emotions that I have about something, but what the person that's looking for the land, what is it that they are interested in looking at specifically, and then I'll be logical and rational about, I'm not propositioning you for looking at land, by the way. That's not the purpose of this video at all. But you can get, I have to emphasize this again, people don't believe me. Europeans really don't believe me. Why? You get 2 to 5 acres and a tiny cabin for like $25K to $30,000. It's like, yes, not only that, it's not hard to do. I could do that if I were so inclined, and like, someone says, here's $25,000, $30,000. Find me 2 to 5 acres and a tiny home. I bet you can't do it. Done! Next day. I could find one basically every day. Look into my eye. If I'm lying, I'm dying, and I'm not lying about it. And when someone buys the land, I'm not getting any kickback or commission. Of course, I would charge somebody to go and inspect it, because that's a lot of work, as you could tell by how tired I am. And I want people to be happy. Kentucky has got 4 real seasons, basically the best neighbors of any state I've ever been in. Definitely the cheapest land, 4 real seasons. Which would you rather have, like expensive land that is, just nasty, horrible? Kind of like that fuzzy green mold that grows on a fruit after you've like lost it behind the microwave for a month. Like, ooh. Land that's ugly like that, that's more expensive than beautiful Kentucky land. It's like, why would you buy that? I got 5 acres of land for $80,000. 5 acres of land for $80,000 in Bumble Scum, Wyoming. Yeah. Oh, it's like, that's nice. It's like there's not a tree in sight. There's no water. There's nothing. There's all these restrictions on the land. You can't build this on the land. You can't collect rainwater. You can't do this. Blah, 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 blah. Most of Kentucky, you don't have any of that. It's like, what can you do in Kentucky? Same thing I could do on my cabin. Stumble out on the front porch in your underoos. Not that I wear those. Blast your pew-pew off the front porch of your swing. In your birthday suit. Not that I've ever done that. Not that you know of, anyway. That's Kentucky. Neighbors are nice. Farmers markets are everywhere. Man, there's nothing not finer than an Amish market for getting natural, organic, real organic, eggs and veggies and fruits and stuff. This is growing zone number 6A and 6B in Kentucky, most of Kentucky anyway. 4 perfect seasons and the cheapest land. I sound like a commercial for Kentucky, but everything I'm saying is accurate. Anyway, this is a response to the innumerable number of requests I've had about land recently. I'm sorry I've been so busy lately, but I've been doing that, and that's what I was doing. Because I do have more than one job, when I've been saying that for years. I don't know if you believe me or not, but it's true. I'm really worn out. I'm going to go to bed early. Thanks so much for watching. Relax Everetas. Man, am I tired.